this is Dread from Epic Builds, and in today's video topic we'll go over 5 tips and tricks I use on a daily basis when I make builds for Last Epoch. This video is aimed towards people who don't necessarily want to follow a build guide, but want to make their own setups in Last Epoch. Before we get into the video, if you've been enjoying the constant flow of Last Epoch content, I'd suggest leaving a like and subscribing to the channel, as that's the best way to support me and my work here at Epic Builds. Last Epoch has a much easier difficulty curve than other ARPGs, meaning that normally you can play something random until you reach empowered monoliths pretty easily, as the game doesn't up the difficulty curve too hard until then. But that doesn't mean the game lacks complexity. It just comes much later in the progression loop, as when you start pushing corruption, things start becoming exponentially difficult, and the same build that works in base 100 corruption would feel absolutely terrible at 300 corruption, due to the way the modifiers interact with each other later on. Hopefully these tips can help you on your journey deep into empowered monoliths. So I've learned my lesson on this multiple times. Currently in Last Epoch, with how the skill tree system works and no way to look at the numbers behind the skills currently, like a POB if you're familiar with Path of Exile, it means that we go by feel most of the time. But you can easily fall into the trap of "this works, don't fix it" philosophy. There have been plenty of times when making builds I did do this mistake, leading to me having to totally revamp the build in the last day of its development. For reference, when I was playing Wraith Necromancer, my first setup was based on HP regen and HP flat, meaning that I had like 2k HP and 700 HP regen, which meant I was very squishy. It made the build feel absolutely terrible, as to build HP regen, it requires you to put HP in a lot of the affixes that HP regen would be, but of course I was trying to focus on HP regen. If I kept going down this road, the build would have felt nowhere near as good as the last iteration I finished on. But someone in my Twitch chat one day reminded me, Vessel of Strife exists. This completely changed the entire outlook of the build, as not only were we benefiting from stacking intelligence for ward retention, which I had none at the time with my current gear, we also had to revamp my entire passive tree to benefit from this interaction. This gave me a little time to redo all of my gearing choices before the due date of the build came around, meaning in the end I had to make educated guesses on what would be the best instead of testing it thoroughly. It's a mistake I will fix when I play Vessel of Strife again, but if I just tried Vessel of Strife in the first place, I could have realized how strong it felt and planned accordingly, saving me a large amount of time. Test everything at your disposal, even if it seems like a small thing. It might end up saving you a lot of effort. So if you're new to ARPGs, this will be a new concept to you. Multiplicative damage sources is the backbone of any strong build, as 2 times 2 times 2 is a larger number than 2 plus 2 plus 2, and it's the exact same in Last Epoch. Before you try to build into a skill for damage, look in the skill tree and type in more damage into the search bar. Look for your available more damage sources and try to figure out your route through some of them, as without them you will end up hitting like a wet noodle. Usually more successful builds have 2 to 3 sources of more damage, as that's enough to get your damage into the respectable 100 to 200k threshold of what I call viable for endgame. Now, this doesn't mean more damage is always important. Multiplicative damage sources come from everywhere, from duration and effect of ailments, resistance pen and shred, and mechanics like Surf and Strike's attack speed mechanic, where the more attack speed you have, the more damage you'll end up doing thanks to all of the modifiers in that build. If you don't understand how multiplicative damage modifiers work, I'll be linking a very helpful video in the description that goes over how they function. This video is talking about Path of Exile, but believe me, the games are so close that this video can be used for both games. So currently, the Last Epoch YouTube sphere is lackluster at best. But that doesn't mean there isn't anything to gain from watching videos. I usually end up watching people's videos like Amarathi Gaming's on builds like EQ Werebear and Shatterstrike Frostbite Spellblade, not because I want to play the builds, but because I want to learn how the interactions work and what choices he's made. The more you understand how a certain skill functions, the easier it will be for you when you come around to play that skill and try things out, as you already know what works well and what is untested. Just knowing what makes skills function goes a long way for helping your understanding of the game, as in most situations I can look at a skill and an interaction and judge if it's even worth my time or not by using past experiences of others. For an example, recently I tried Shattered Lance Upheaval Druid, and oh my god, it was an absolute waste of time. Just didn't do enough damage to do endgame, and the 4 mana cost was absolutely brutal. Amarathi told me, hey, Upheaval has problems, probably not worth your time. Of course, Dread being as stubborn as he is usually, I tried it anyways, and bam, 2 days of time wasted just trying to make a bad skill function. Things like this can help save time, meaning you can spend more time on builds that deserve your time. User resources, ask around. Don't be afraid to watch a video just to know how stuff works. Like for instance, my videos for my builds usually are meant to be watched just the intro and not the rest of the video. As you can see in my video analytics, I have an average view duration of 4 minutes, which is my usual intro length, right? So most people just watch the intro just to see how the build functions. They don't actually end up watching the rest of the video, which is meant for newer players who don't understand how the game works yet, right? So don't be afraid to put on a video if you're like afraid of how a build functions. I am a very frequent offender of this tip as I get attached to builds all the time, but EHG is still balancing and trying things out. So what might be a cool build interaction in your eyes could be a bugged skill that they still haven't fixed yet. Like for instance, recently, people were enjoying snapshotting minions to reach insane amounts of damage. TLDR of what snapshotting is, since minions stay in place when you exchange gear, it means if you summon a minion with a certain set of gear on, and then take it off and put something else on, it means that the summon would have the stats of the old gear while you have the stats of the new piece of gear, meaning some shenaniganry could be enabled because of this. But they finally fixed it recently. Most minions resummon themselves between zones, meaning the bug is no longer abusable in an easily accessible way, meaning a lot of people's builds don't work anymore because they were abusing the snapshot to reach much higher stats and numbers than before. That Summon Sabretooth build sucks now, that because you can't use a triple HP chest while also using a double minion damage prefix chest at the same time. That's why I usually do not showcase bugged interactions or abuse snapshotting in my videos, as a lot of the current builds I have would be invalidated because of this change. So don't get attached to bugs or unintended interactions. They're fun to play around with to see obscene stupid stuff happen, but not worth enough time to make an actual serious build, and that's pretty much it for that one. If you've seen me in public, in Twitch streams or Discord, you know very well that I try a lot of different builds, and I fail a lot of them as well. I fail way more builds than I make. What you see on the channel are the chosen few that make it to the video creation process, as I have very strict requirements on what becomes a video usually, unless I make an exception. I could list off all the builds I failed. Let's go. Cold Shattered Lance Upheaval Druid, Necrotic Maelstrom Locust Swarmblade, Fire Aura Spellblade 2.0, Bleed Skeleton Necromancer, Cinder Strike Ignite, up to 5 of them I believe now, Bleed Werebear, Mana Strike Manaless Spellblade, Rive Ignite Paladin, Rive Shattered Lance VK, Forge Strike Two-Handed Forge Guard, and the list goes on and on and on. What I'm trying to say here is, builds fail. All the time. Don't feel bad. Not everything is supposed to work. It's better to understand when you feel like a build isn't worth your time and move on, as that's the most time efficient. Ask yourself these questions when you're thinking about canning a build. Am I having fun? Are my shade kills slow? Does the build have anything good about it? Do I hate doing monoliths with it? And of course, this question again, am I having fun? As that's the most important question you should be asking yourself constantly. There are plenty of builds I have axed, not because they weren't good, but because I was not having fun. I didn't make a video on EQ Werebear because I didn't enjoy waiting 5 seconds to deal damage. Other people's did it, and there's nothing wrong with that. There isn't a catch-all build that works for everyone. What I find tolerable is something someone else completely hates. So don't be sad when a build fails, laugh about it, and move on. And to be honest, I learn way more about the game when something fails than when something succeeds, as learning why things don't work is much more valuable than learning, oh yeah, they do work. Thank you so much for watching, and have a wonderful rest of your day wherever you're at. And this has been Dread from Epic Builds, off to create more builds.